But, we wanted to start out right away with the best legal advice that I would say money can buy, but I can't even afford them. Jonathan Turley, as you know, is a nationally recognized legal scholar. He has written extensively in areas ranging from constitutional law to legal theory and civil lawsuits. And we invited him on the show to shed some light on executive privilege. What is it? Can the president invoke it successfully every time he doesn't want to produce a document? Hi, Jonathan.
Hey, how's it going, Randy?
Yeah, I'm very proud of you for showing up for Keith so much, because I've been editing all that stuff, and then I realized, hey, I have a phone. I could call him. So not the brightest bulb, but, at least I'm slow and accurate. Let me ask you a couple of questions. First of all, the president has invoked executive privilege many times. The president refuses to produce any documents whatsoever having to do with anything that this administration is involved in with regard to, the warrantless wiretapping, which you suggested should be investigated as a crime, because if it's a crime that Congress is investigating, then there can be no claim of executive privilege. Is that correct?
Well, there can be a claim. It's just not a very strong one. The supreme executive privilege actually doesn't appear in the Constitution. It's a creation of the courts, and specifically the last time the Supreme Court dealt with this was in 1974 with Richard Nixon. And but one thing the court was unanimous on is that whatever executive privilege means, it's trumped when there is a need to gather criminal evidence by the grand jury or by Congress. And so it is not absolute. President Bush seems to harbor the misconception that it is some type of absolute power that he has.
Yeah, and it's not a constitutional power, as you said. It's a privilege, and the court. Well, in that Nixon case, wasn't there one woman who actually was granted executive privilege, so she didn't have to testify, and wasn't she later found guilty of lying to Congress?
Well, in fact, the Supreme Court ruled against Richard Nixon and said that he did have to turn over the material, and courts since then have also rejected executive privilege claims in these types of areas. The problem with President Bush's claim here is that it doesn't make much sense from a constitutional standpoint, because executive privilege is supposed to protect you from the disclosure of information. The whole idea is that presidents say, look, if my people think they're eventually going to have to disclose what they're saying to me, they're not going to say it to me. Well, the problem is that the president here says they will disclose it to you. They'll meet with you in private meetings and talk to you about what happened. They just won't do it if you put them under oath or use a transcript.
Yeah, what is that for? I mean, why are they making that offer, which, Patrick Leahy, the Judiciary Chairman in the Senate, says that's not an offer at all. And I agree with him. It's worthless. But why that scenario? No transcript, no oath, in private, selected senators only?
Well, I think it's a bizarre use of executive privilege. Executive privilege is not there to protect Karl Rove from a perjury charge. It's there to prevent the disclosure of information. I mean, he would have been better off by saying, I don't want my people talking about this at all. But instead, they put the emphasis on not testifying under oath. And, he had done this previously with Condoleezza Rice when she was National Security Advisor, and he really stonewalled for a very long time, saying, I won't let you put her under oath. Eventually, as Congress is moving towards courts, he caved in, and she did, in fact, give testimony.
Yeah, which was something like, we got a warning. I think it was called Osama bin Laden determined to strike within the United States. That was the day, right? Yeah, I remember that. Now, listen, if there were released emails, and these emails were on Republican National Committee email servers as opposed to whitehouse.gov email servers, how is there a claim of executive privilege, and is it even permissible to have private White House conversations on official Justice Department business on RNC servers? Doesn't that in and of itself violate the Presidential Records Act?
Well, there's a lot there in that question. I think that, first of all, the reason this claim is so facially weak is not just because Congress is, in fact, investigating federal violations, but many of these communications did not even involve the president, and many of them are, as you noted, using alternative means of communication or dealing on these types of internet or websites. So it's very, very weak. And what it does show, I believe, is a violation of the Presidential Records Act. I think that there should be no question at this point that there was an effort to evade the reporting requirements. I mean, Karl Rove almost exclusively used RNC communications.
Yeah, and there's two things about that. One, if there's no, everybody is saying there's no underlying crime in the attorney scandal, and of course, the only reason why there's a prosecutor scandal is because the prosecutors themselves say they was smeared by the White House. In and of itself, not a crime, just bad form. But if indeed they are, in violation of the Presidential Records Act, then there is an underlying crime. And in addition, I've seen some of the emails that were erroneously sent to a George Bush parody site regarding the topic of the purge of the prosecutors that clearly shows an attachment. And when you open the attachment, it is caging lists of voters in the 2004 election cycle. So there are two underlying crimes that I can see deserve investigation with regard to the prosecutors' firing. Why is everybody so lazy and just keeps repeating, there is no underlying crime? Of course there is.
I think the point is I think that Congress does have crimes and federal violations that have been alleged, and Congress has constitutional right and duty to investigate them. The question is really going to be what the intestinal fortitude of the Democrats will be. I mean, the Democrats have been certainly using heated rhetoric, but they really haven't done much aggressively. I mean, for example, as you know...
Why do you think that is, just as an opinion?
I got to tell you, I don't know. I think that they don't seem to connect the fact that Congress